Welcome back to Let Glory Shine. I am your host, Martha Kartaoui. And today I don't have a guest because I want to address some questions that consistently come up. People reach out to me on social media, or they've watched a show that I've done, or they have watched an interview that I've done, or read my book. Or follow me on social media, and they have questions. And so I often get some questions that I am going to cover today regarding cults. I'm very public about me growing up and being born into a religious cult. And I have been out now for 20 years. And so I've been putting my life back together. And so I know a thing or two about being in a cult and then having to heal after a lot of really difficult things that I experienced within the first 26 years of my life because of the cult. Extreme trauma, including physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, sexual. And so it's been a journey, but I'm really proud of how far I've come. And I understand that there's a lot of people out there that may be part of a cult that don't know they're part of a cult. And so I want to clear up some of these questions that have been asked of me. I want to start out by actually talking about the definition of a cult. So when I'm going to give you a simple definition out of the Webster Dictionary, and it says a cult is a small group of people with shared beliefs, often extreme or unorthodox, and led by a charismatic figure. They frequently have a strong focus on a particular leader or idea and may isolate members from the mainstream world. Often cults revolve around a powerful leader who is seen as having special knowledge or authority, and cults often hold beliefs that are outside the mainstream or considered unconventional. So all of those things are things that I identify with the group that I grew up in. And I grew up in a group in Shawano, Wisconsin. It's had many names over the years, but when my parents joined it in 1975, it was called the Fellowship of the Lord Jesus Christ. By the time I was born in 1979, I never grew up with it being called that. In fact, we really didn't have a name. The organization has taken on many names. The most recent one is SIST. So if you Google that, you will find lots of information about my cult. But it was focused on one leader, and everything that we practiced came from him. He was our godlike figure. And he was very charismatic. He was very, there was just a lot of charisma about him, and he was very convincing, and he was very authoritative, and he was very, people really flocked to him because of his unconventional confidence and his ability to really read people and read the room and have this, he just had this aura about him that really drew people to him. So that's the definition of a cult. So there's some other things that when I think about our cult or cults in general are always the same. There is generally isolation. There's generally manipulation. And then there is the blind faith and the inability to question the belief system of the said organization. I grew up knowing that you just didn't question what Cult Man said. You blindly did what he said, you followed what he said, and you didn't question it, because if you questioned it, we were taught that we were questioning God's authority over our lives. And so we never questioned him. If he said, don't eat pork, we didn't eat pork. If he said, don't eat candy, we didn't eat candy. If he said, you have to shower twice a day at these times, we did that. Or if he said, we only could wear skirts and blouses and never cut our hair and not wear jewelry or makeup, that's what we did, right? So there was always a blind faith and an inability to ask questions of what the leader was, ordering us or telling us was best for our lives. So those are other things that are very that are very important to understand about what it is that creates a cult. Also, the aspect of a fear-based doctrine. Generally, a cult is going to have a fear-based doctrine, because if it's all about love and kindness and self-worth and self-awareness and self-growth, nobody's going to be in fear all the time, right? It has to be a fear-based doctrine. And our fear-based doctrine was about we were going to go to hell for our sins, that we could never measure up, and that God was always mad at us. And it was the hell, brimstone, and fire approach of like that God was angry and God was visiting the sins and iniquities upon generation to generation. And there was no talk about the mercies, the grace, the love of God, right? It was all the fear-based doctrine that kept us controlled. So those are other things to be considered when we talk about a cult. Another thing that's important to understand is how smart people join cults. I get asked this question all the time, not only about my parents, because I consider my parents very smart, very educated, and especially my dad. My dad's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and my mom is highly educated as well, and is very smart as well. So how did they end up joining a cult? That's a great question. And I've had this conversation with my parents, because before I wrote my book, Glory Going All In, I sat down with them and just wanted to understand better, how did you guys end up joining a cult, and how did you stay for 30 years, right? And the answer to that is a simple one, and that is well, cults don't start out being cults. They don't start out evil. It started out as a group of people that were seeking. They were looking for something that was bigger than themselves. It was the 1970s. There was lots of evangelical movements happening, and they got sucked into one of those evangelical movements. And it started out about community. It started out about friendship. It started out about supporting one another and loving each other and understanding that this community was special, right? And slowly it became what it ended up being when I was born into it. And then when I spent the 26 years that I did in it, those things happen so slowly, so you don't even recognize that they're happening. When you're part of something that makes you feel like you're special, that the outside doesn't understand it, because they're not supposed to. We are the chosen people. We are the special people. God has chosen us specifically for this purpose, and the outside shouldn't understand us, and we shouldn't understand the outside. And when you feed that for years and years and years, it creates this bubble around you. And then when this manipulation and isolation started happening, people our group didn't even realize that it was happening to them, because they were already bought into the doctrine. They were already bought into Cult Man. They were already bought into this movement that was being created. And so when those small things started happening, and the abuse started happening to the children, and the verbal abuse started happening to the adults, and to all of these things, there was already a precipice of understanding that we were sinners. We were never going to be good enough, and that Cult Man was our way to heaven. And so he put himself in such a strong position, but he didn't only put himself in that position. We, as the brethren, as the leader, or as the followers within the cult, we propped him up on this proverbial pedestal of power, of ego, of he was the only thing that was important in our lives, and everything that our lives that we did in our lives had to be approved by Cult Man. what we ate, what if we bought a house, what college or schools we went to, if we went to schools, everything was run by Cult Man because we put him in this position of power. And then he, of course, abused the power. And that's generally what happens in every cult. Is it starts out as this good thing, and then power, ego, money, sex, all of those things go to the head of the charismatic leader, and it becomes evil. It becomes dominating. It becomes a power struggle. It becomes this good versus evil thing, right? And then it's often too late because you're already sucked in. You don't know that you have the choice to make a different choice. You're already sucked in. And so that's very much what happened in our cult, is that when you finally start having the ability to question, you've already had all of this programming saying there must be something wrong with you that you're questioning Cult Man. There must be something wrong with your heart. You aren't aligned with God. You're not aligned with Cult Man. That's why there's something wrong with you, not with Cult Man, right? Like that's what we were programmed to believe and programmed to think, is that we were the problem. We were the sinners. We were the ones that there was a heart issue with, and not that what Cult Man was doing or creating was bad or evil or unjust or abuse or trauma ridden, right? And so when we finally wake up one day and you start going, is this bad? Could this possibly be bad? Right? Generally, those are questions that are forced because you've been opened to something else, generally from the outside. And so another question that I get often is, well, how do I know if I'm part of a cult? And my first question always is, do you have freedom of thought? Are you able to question what's being told to you? Are you being controlled in the way that you eat, in the way that you dress, in your thoughts, in your understanding of God? Is any of that being controlled by either the leader or within your group? But first question is always, are you being controlled by freedom of thought? That is brainwashing. If you are being controlled and told what to believe, and that there's only one way to believe or else, right? Then leading back to that fear factor that I was talking about, right? If those are things that you're experiencing, you might be in a cult, right? You're being brainwashed, you're being controlled. And so the next question I get is, well, if I'm in a cult, how do I get out of a cult? And that's a really great question. And I get this all the time, is like, in our cult specifically, I know that I've watched lots of documentaries about other cults, and it's sometimes the same for other cults, but in some cults, you can just walk away and say, I'm done. Like, I don't choose to subscribe to the way of thinking any longer, or this just doesn't align with what I want to do with my life any longer, and I'm separating myself. And you can just walk away, or you can walk away with no explanation and just walk away, right? There's other cults where people all live on the compound and are very controlled and isolated, and there are guards and there are people that are employed to keep this cult or these grounds safe and secluded from the outside. And it's much harder to get out of those being unnoticed or asking to leave. Generally, there could be abuse that follows, or there could be people that tried to stop you, or there would be repercussions for that thinking of like, I want to leave, right? There's repercussions. They could be physical, they could be verbal, they could be emotional, they could be spiritual. There's so many different abuses that could follow if you are being that controlled and that isolated. In my group, there were most of the brethren lived not on the compound. They lived in their own homes in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, in Michigan. And we all commuted to the compound each weekend. And we spent our entire Friday, Saturday, and Sunday or Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday until late night, generally after midnight, 1 o'clock, before we would start driving back home, usually just in time to get up to go to work the next day or go to school the next day. So we commuted to the compound every weekend, and the majority of the families did not live on the compound. But at 18, I moved into the compound. I was chosen. I was told by Cult Man to move into the compound. And so if you've read my book or heard me speak, you know that I had to escape because I didn't have permission to leave. My every move was monitored. I worked for one of the cult-owned businesses in my 20s. So everything was monitored about what I did, where and when I ate, where and when I showered. Everything was controlled. Everything was watched. Everything was monitored. And so I didn't have the freedom to just be like, I'm out. So I had to escape, and I escaped during a God ordained blizzard. And I did have help from the outside by a man named Papa that I call my guardian angel, or at least an angel, a divine angel, because I know each of us are born with our own guardian angels. But I know that I had help by this earthly man that had taken an interest in me and had frequented my store for several years, growing a relationship with me. And I respected him and I loved him like a grandfather figure, because I didn't have a grandfather figure in my life because our group was isolated. We weren't allowed to have those relationships with extended family because we were isolated. And so he took that place of like a grandfather figure, and I loved him and I respected him. And he was the first person to really talk to me about the love of God and the love of Jesus and the mercies and grace, because that was never talked about in our group.
Thank you for watching Prospera TV Network. We hope you're enjoying the show. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
And so he got my mind really starting to question certain things, and I started to trust him. And growing up, we were told we could never trust anybody from the outside, that they would always be trying to trick us, to try to brainwash us, to try to take us away from the truth, right? And so it was built into me not to trust anybody from the outside. But as Papa continued to share his life with me and continued to visit me and continued for us to have these beautiful conversations, I began to trust him, and I began to see him as somebody that really did care about me and my highest good. And just to prove that point, I lied to him for years, because he would ask me questions about the cult, because everybody in Shawano knew which organization or which businesses were owned by the cult. And so he would ask me questions, and I would lie to him, and I would tell him what I was programmed to tell people about who owned the shop and who was the organizer behind it and who founded it and who paid us and all of those things. And I was taught to lie. So and during those years that I worked at the shop, I wasn't paid. So I didn't have any money to be able to just leave and start a new life. And so this man, I know, was divinely put into my life in order to help me to leave when I became ready. And so I did have to escape, but there's many other people like my parents that are from my same cult. When my parents made the choice to leave, They just called Cult Man, and my dad said, "Hey, we're done. We're not coming back. Don't try to convince us otherwise. We're done." And that was the end of it. My parents then just were never contacted by him again, and they separated peacefully. That wouldn't have been possible for me, again, because I lived in the compound and I was hunted for a long time after I escaped, because I'm assuming because I knew too much, because I had seen too much and too much had happened to me. And so he tried to find me and sent people to look for me for I don't know how long, but I hid for 3 months because they kept popping up places looking for me. So I stayed in hiding and began to start building my own life. So that brings me to the next question of, well, how do I get out of a cult if I find out that I'm in a cult? And I'm starting to have these questions, and I'm starting to wonder if this is really right for me, or if this is if I'm am being traumatized, or I am being controlled or isolated, and I'm ready to say I'm done. Like, how do I get out of a cult? And that's a really difficult question for me to answer, because I lived it, but it's a hard question because everybody's situation is different, and it's safety first. So I can't make a blanket statement that just says, plan to escape during a winter blizzard, because everybody's circumstances are different, and the arrangements of the cult are different. And so I can't tell people how to leave. I can suggest things like start questioning, and then start figuring out, is this something that I want to continue to be part of, or am I ready to take my life back and understand that that's going to come with challenges, and that's going to come with hardships, but it's also going to give you, or whoever is ready to leave, a liberty of being able to choose themselves for the first time and begin a healing journey. And it will be a healing journey, but it's safety first. And the other thing that I would recommend is, if there's any way to begin to build a relationship with somebody on the outside that could help you in any way to start devising a plan, or if you can go to the local authorities, trying that. Like, where there's a will, there's a way. And what I have come to understand about my own escape, and the many escapes that I've witnessed, from my own group, but also from other series that I've watched and other books that I've read, is that when we become really real about our situation and understand this no longer serves us, where there's a will, there's a way, and you will find that way. And I believe that the universe will support that. God will support that, but you have to make a choice. And I talk often about, well, people ask me, like, what made you make the choice to finally leave after 26 years? And that was all that you ever knew. And for me, I did not have the ability to choose myself, because I didn't know that I was in a cult. Even though Papa had been talking to me for years, and I had heard the whisperings throughout the town, I was brought up to really honor and respect and revere this group and Cult Man. And so I had no desire to think that this was a negative thing. I always put myself down, saying, like, the reason I'm feeling these things is because there's something wrong with my heart. There's something wrong with my connection. I'm the bad one, right? And so I didn't make a decision to leave for me. I actually made a decision to leave because I found out that my sister Smyrna was pregnant with her first child. And I had found her on the internet, and we had started communicating, and she had told me that she was pregnant. And something snapped in me that day, because she's my younger sister, and we had spent most of our lives together, at least the first 18 years of our lives together, sharing a bedroom. And so and we had had many ups and downs because both of us are very different people, but I loved her, and I could not imagine her going through being pregnant and having her first child without me being present. And that was the switch that flipped for me. And I remember getting off the phone that day, and as soon as I couldn't wait to talk to Papa. And when Papa came the next day, I just told him everything. I told him that I had talked to my sister and that she was pregnant and that I had to get home to be with her. And home was North Carolina. And so I was in Wisconsin, and my sister was in North Carolina. So I had to find a way to get back to North Carolina. And so he told me that he would start praying about it. And I started praying about it as well. But the problem with praying at that time was I pray when I would have a prayer in my heart, I thought that had to go through Cult Man to be approved, right? Because Cult Man was our intercessor. He always was in the middle of everything. You didn't pray independently of telling and sharing with Cult Man. And so it felt weird for me to be praying for something like to help me escape this cult, right? Well, I didn't know it was a cult, to escape this group and make it safely home to be with my sister. But in my way, I started calling out to God of like, I want to be home with my sister. I never grew up with aunts and uncles or grandparents, and I didn't want my niece or nephew to have to grow up without me. There was something that was just so sacred about that, that I understood I didn't want to miss out on. And I didn't want this next generation to grow up without their aunt. And so that was the switch for me. And that's what gave me the courage. That's what gave me the fortitude. That's what gave me the wisdom to be able to say, no, come hell or high water, I am going to get home and I'm going to go through this pregnancy with my sister. And so it was about 10 days after I had that conversation with Papa, we started devising a plan. We started praying, and we started creating a way out for me. And when you have that switch moment, that moment of like, no, this is what I have to do, it felt like to me that God just rolled out the red carpet and lined up everything so succinctly and so easily that allowed me to successfully escape. And I know about a not successful escape because I had tried to escape about 6 years before that, and I had been caught and brought back, and I knew what the repercussions of that was. And I knew that I had to be successful, because if I didn't get out this time, I would never have the opportunity to leave again. I just knew that because the repercussions of me leaving the first time were very painful. My head was shaved for 15 months. All of my belongings were burnt at the burnt pile on the property. And I was basically excommunicated from sitting with the brethren's daughters during meetings. I had to sit outside of the room. I was no longer, like, I was tainted. I had this big like letter A, right? That I was no longer allowed to be part of the fellowship. And that was painful. And I was spit on, and I was called names, and it was very, very, very painful. Not to mention I was beaten repeatedly, and I was belittled, and I was humiliated. And so it was very painful. So I knew that I had to escape. If for this time, I would have to be successful, because this could be my only time. And so, in planning and praying and understanding that God did all of this, right? Papa bought me a car, $1,000 Dodge Neon. I am always going to be grateful to him for that, because I didn't have a getaway vehicle. I had no money. Papa gave me the money to start my new life over, $1,500 in an envelope with a credit card, so that I would be able to get home safely and be able to start my life. And so I needed somebody from the outside to be able to help me to execute, because I would not have been able to do it otherwise. So how do you leave a cult? I think the first thing is recognizing I'm done. I will find a way, come hell or high water. And then, praying for guidance, praying for wisdom, and understanding that it will come, and trying to reach somebody on the outside. But I could answer questions for several more episodes, and I will over the next several months. We will address more questions. But I thank you for joining another episode of Let Glory Shine. And I just want to say thank you for being here. And I hope that this has been helpful. And if you have questions, please send them to me. Reach out to me on social media or leave them on the YouTube videos, and I will answer them in another episode. Until then, let glory shine.
Let glory shine. From the ashes I rise. Every scar a story, every tear baptized. This is my freedom, this is my climb. Let glory shine, it's the power inside. This is your Prospera era, where dreams align with grace, abundance flows like rivers. You've stepped into your place. Rise, reign, and remember, you were born to shine. Welcome to your moment, Prospera, it's time. We hope you enjoyed today's show on Prospera TV Network. Make it a point to visit us on YouTube and catch all your favorite shows anytime you want. Interested in hosting a show of your own? Or advertising your business on our network? Contact Elena Rodriguez.